Dine Hachitim were chemical matzahs. Remind me yesterday, I didn't say anything about Rabbi Kanepski. So I read on COL for Meretz Yisrael that in the Tavshin Chavs, the Rabbi Chadakov sent a letter to Eretz Yisrael to Rabbi Israel Slonim about getting Svarim for the Rebbe's library. And he writes over there that there's a Rav Kanepski, the Stipler's son, who made a sefer called Kiryas Melech, and they'd like to get the sefer. So somebody went to him and showed him the letter, and there's a picture of him sitting and reading the letter that was sent from Chadakov for his sefer. And of course he gave the sefer, but they also write over there that one time in Lud, there was a Rosh Yeshiva by the name the Baruch Shimon Schneerson. He was an Edom from the Chebina Rov. And later he left the Lubavitch Yeshiva and became the Rosh Yeshiva in Chebin. But he was by the Rebbe, and the Rebbe asked him, who is this Rabbi Kanepski from Bnei Brak? So he said he's a big Talmud Chacham that doesn't mix in any politics, any government. He doesn't mix in any. He sits and learns. So he asked the Rebbe, why are you asking about him? The Rebbe said, because I saw his sefer. I think the Rebbe said the word it's marvel. It means it's awesome. He made the sefer, Kiryas Sefer Rambam, where he took the whole Rambam and goes through the whole Rambam, and every word of the Rambam, where there's, or every halacha, where it comes from, a source for it. And tikkunim, and I looked up on HebrewBooks.org, the sefer, they have already a 6th edition of the sefer. Interesting yid. He was there was once in the yeshiva, they have what they call a college program. And in order to be eligible for the college program, you have to be accredited. And to be accredited, so now they made their own accreditation organization that accredits the yeshivas. So there comes a Rosh Yeshiva and some college professors, and they spend a day or 2 days in the Moised, and you have to write a whole chibur about the Moised of it. So I used to handle this program in the yeshiva. I got the program for the yeshiva, and one time California was having also an accreditation visit. So Rabbi Shochet called me up and asked, he said, take care of it for me, like who should be the Rosh Yeshiva. You have to find someone that has a good relation with the Lubavitch. So I called him up and I said, I got for you somebody by the name of Fiverson. Okay. He says to me, he's a gadol. I say, yeah. I said, no. He said, and Shrei is a gadol. So I say, Shrei is a big gadol. So he says, I know them both. When I went to Lakewood, I met the two of them. How do you distinguish? One is a big, one is not. I say, it depends how much you spoke against Lubavitch. So in the belt, there was in Bnei Brak, in Panovich, there was the guy in Adar, over here, he was got a gadol, not because of against Lubavitch, because he had a friendly relationship. His Inyan was just sitting and learning. He didn't. All the other things didn't interest him at all. Okay, finally.
Was gehasst mit auf der Sefer, an kein Chassidim.
That's very smart.
Das Kelobabitz, kein Chassidim. In seine etliche Rebala gewinnt bei ihm. Soll Mishane sein, da ist also zu gechanged.
Ja, genau. There's a tshuva in Noda B'Yehuda. There's a tshuva in Noda B'Yehuda. Where the Noda B'Yehuda writes over there against Sidim. He writes, Tzadikim yechu bo, v'chasidim yikashru bo. Okay, the pasuk is Chasidim yechu bo, Pashtim yikashru bo. Ich habe mich gebeten bei dem Sohn von Noda B'Yehuda, als soll mit überdrücken, soll man es beiten. Soll man rausnehmen, Wort, hat gesagt, mein Tate hat gemacht von Pashtim Chasidim. Und ihr wollt es auch machen verkehrt, das kann ich nicht.
Ja, das waren jene Zeiten.
Okay. Gut, okay. Ich sage es so, Ksiv steht in Posek, Ushmatem es amatzos. Mikan, שצריכים לשמור את החיטים לשם מצוות matzah. שלא עליהם מים, that it shouldn't come in contact with water. לדעת קצת מגדל הפסקים, צריכים שמירה זו מיד משס כצירו באילך. That from the time that they cut the wheat, you have to already watch it, that it shouldn't get wet. And some hold that this is a deraisa, and some hold this is a rabbanan. That there's different opinions about that. Avo haminig hu kapaiskim, the sagi hu bishmira, mishor shemarichen oisa litchain. That's called, in other words, I think I mentioned already, that the shmira geshas ksira, and shmira mishas tchina. So the minig is all the companies that make matzah, not the shmura matzah company, it's shmura mishas tchina. In other words, when they grind the kernels, so from then on, it has to be l'shem mitzvahs matzah. V'acham medaktikim b'mitzvahs chayshishin l'shmira mishas kasira. And v'chein nachal nasis. And that's, he says, is the right way to do. V'roi Redactic, she'la yamdu hashibolim b'mechuba, ad she'yishyashru kol tzochem, v'yalbinu. That means that this is, let me first explain what a wheat field looks like. Wheat grows on what's called on a stalk. In other words, like a big stick grows up from the ground, and on top of the stick, there's like a bag. And in that bag, there are kernels. The kernels look like corn, look something like corn. Like when you buy popcorn, you buy the kernels, Then they cut it. When they cut it, then they have what's called dosh. Dosh is dreshen. What's the dreshen? Dreshen, I mean, these were from the Melachos in the Mishkan. Dreshen is that they want to get the kernel out of the bag. So want to get it out of the bag. So they have to knock it. The Amolga Zeiten, they used to have behemoths walk on it. And then the bags would break open, and the bag would break into pieces, looked like little pieces of a very thin paper, and you had the kernels. Then they had miruach. Miruach was called in the olden day called windschaffen. What's that windschaffen? There was a farmer would stand, and take a shovel full of kernels, and in the kernel was these little pieces of paper. He'd throw it up in the air. You throw it up in the air, and the wind would come and blow away the little piece of paper, and the kernels would fall down on the ground, and then you had a whole pile, a pile of kernels. This is how it worked. Today, for says everything is done by machine, is done a little bit different, but he's saying now, when the wheat is growing, it can rain from today to tomorrow. It doesn't become chametz. But the problem is that it shouldn't become chametz when it's fully grown already. That was vegetable shag already. So he's saying over here that in other words, it should be like very dry. It shouldn't be like after rain, wait, not cut it while it's raining, but it should be dry, and it becomes the husk over there begins to look like it becomes white. Ki oz im yerdu gisham aleim gishamim yachmitzu afilu b'mechuba ki meshen tzich on the kaka. Then they could become chametz.
I think it means that you shouldn't wait till that final stage. You should wait a little bit earlier because it's going to be already that dry.
Right. Al kain rov v'noch nuktzeh ba'oid shem oid kisas mare yerokas. Well, it still has a little bit some green in it. She'efshe. No, it's okay. Now, bibald. Maybe we'll talk about this later. Okay. Now there's a whole shaila about a guy. The farmer's a guy. If you have to have l'shem mitzvahs matzah, so a guy cannot mechaber on l'shem mitzvahs matzah. So how do you use the when in the bakery, when they're baking the matzah, making the matzah, always there's someone that always keeps reminding everyone, l'shem mitzvahs matzah. When you cut the wheat, you have to also cut it l'shem mitzvahs matzah. So some rely on that is a Yisrael Eimed al Gabav. So they say that helps over here for this Shema. And I also saw that there's some time when they go to cut the wheat, so the mashgiach will get on the tractor together with the Goyish farmer, and when they drive around cutting the wheat, he will drive around together with them and trachten and zogen l'shem mitzvahs matzah.
Now, the Rebbe holds that we can't rely on a goy what he thinks.
Yeah, but there's no breda, so I'm telling you. So the other eitzah is to get on the tractor together with the worker. But and others paskin that some sefer says you could rely on Yisrael Agabe for this. Umisha efsheloi bechit and shmurim mishas gesira v'chol yemei achag matayv. In other, before it was talking about the mitzvahs matzah, the matzah that were used by the Seder. He says, if you could manage to have shmura a whole year, that at least for the 2 nights, that was a gewaldige oiftu that the Rebbe made, that he introduces the whole idea of giving out matzah. Incidentally, he talks over here everything about chitim. But the truth, the chitim is wheat. Now, matzah could be from chameshes minei dogim. So you have spelt and rye and oats, different things. But the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch says over here that Mitzvah and Mufcha Ratchel Likach Chitim Lamatzas Mitzvah V'loi Echad Mishar Abo Mine Dogam V'chein HaMinik. And then he says, V'im Eloi Chitim Yikach Mishar Mine Dogam Min HaChav V'ol V'yosek Desh Yech HaMatzah L'Teyavam. But even though it says it this way in Shulchan Aruch, today it became popular. There's a lot of people that they buy spelt matzah because it's easier to digest. So I'm just saying that it costs more, because the reason it costs more is because they told me that it's harder to work with it. To make the matzah, it's harder for the vulgars, so they produce less in the time that they work. Okay. Chitim shenimtza behem mevukois oy mitzumachas. Let's explain what that means. I said before that the kernel in there in that bag that they broke open the bag comes out a pile of kernels. The kernels look like if you ever made popcorn. So just like they look like the popcorn kernels. They're yellow. They have a yellow shell around them, and in them is white flour. Sometimes the kernel comes like a little ball with the top like by the esrog, not that big, a little point, Sometimes there's wheat growing out of the kernel. Especially, it's a known thing that in the health food department, those people that are into health food, they drink wheat grist. Now, how do you get wheat grist? The way you get wheat grist is they take a tray and they put out some earth on the tray, and they put in there the wheat kernels, and then later the wheat kernel begins to grow, and it grows out a piece of grass from it. So these people, the health food people, they cut off the grass and they grind it and they make a drink from it. It's supposed to be a healthy drink. I don't know, but that's what they say. So that's called mitzumachos. Mitzumachos means that there's growing out from the kernel, is growing out a piece of grass already. Mivukos mean that the top of the kernel is not sealed. Like it's supposed to come to a point and it's sealed, it's closed. So mivukos means that it begins to crack open. So now he's saying, what does that mean? If that is happening, that's a siman of chimutz already. Like what we call in English like fermentation. So he says, Chitim shenimso mehem mivukos or mitzumachos hasham muta. In other words, if you separate them, take out these that are mitzumachos or mivukos, and use the rest of them. Redactic hetiv, im yesh shamak uponim shishim keneged hamivukos v'hamitzumachos. The Sefer says there is a din over here of bittul b'shishim. B'chal chametz b'Pesach is b'marshul, but chametz before Pesach is not really chametz. So mele it's a tater boa. So there is a din of bittul. So the din of bittul is b'shishim. So what they do is, I remember maybe 50 years ago, maybe more than that, they used to go. There used to be upstate New York. When you go to the country, you drive with the thruway, and you get off at exit 16, I think it is, right? Exit. If you keep going further on the thruway, there's a exit 18, I believe. There's a town called New Paltz. Today there's a shliach over there because there's a college in New Paltz. At that time, there was a water mill. In other words, a mill where they ground the flour, and it's operated by water. What's the milah of operated by water?
Kal.
Because it's cooler. If it's operated by electric, so electricity is hotter. That was the only water mill. Today they don't have it. But that was the only water mill. So Lamashal, when we came over there, I remember there's some place, I don't know if it's still available, but one time Shalom Goldstein made a video for Pesach. And you see over there, when we came over there, they had a room over there where all the bags of the kernels, their own bags, so they bring them into, and they pour them into a bin, a big bin, and you see Shia Kof or Shalom climbing into the kernels, and he's looking over the kernels. You're supposed to pick up a few handfuls of kernels and check. If there's, even if there is muvukais or mitzumachas, but if there's shishim keneged, so then you could use it. There is an opinion, the Alter Rebbe doesn't pass on this way, but there is a shayla, if mitzumachas or muvukais is called min b'mina or min b'sheina mina. What's the nafka mina? The din, Lamashal, when you have, let's say, you're cooking, and something falls into the soup, so that's min b'sheina mina. The soup is one thing, and the thing that fell in is a different thing. So there's a din of bittul b'shishim. These are by min b'mina. Lamashal, let's say, if you're making eggs, and why do we make 3 eggs together? We make 3 eggs together because if there's one that has a blood spot, so then it becomes batal b'roiv. 1 against 2 is batal b'roiv. So there's a shayla, is this considered min b'minai or min b'sheina minai? Do we say that it's chitim? They're all chitim. The bald is all chitim, so maybe it's min b'minai. So b'meila, you don't need shishim, but ratchil you need shishim, but akaponim, if there's roiv, but there's some that hold that it's not called min b'minai, because this is one type of chitim, and this is another type of chitim. This is the mitzumachos, and this is the muvukais, and you could see them, the difference between them. So the Alter Rebbe passes that you need shishim, not roiv, but there are days that held that, and you have to understand that a Mol Gezeiten, it was different than today, that you have one bakery baking for the whole world matzah. Every homeowner, every household baked matzah for Pesach. So they had a little bit of weights, and they did it with a chaim shayad, by a hand mill. So sometimes there could be shilas, and you have to look for a tatum to be matzah, and before Pesach, there's certain things that were makel, and we don't say that it's chayza v'niyah when it comes Pesach. Okay, good. Huh? Yeah, because was the Hobnik and but this for Erev Pesach, but not for the Chutz Berserk and the. Okay, let's finish the simon just. Chitna shemso behem muvakois and mitzumachos. He says Hasham mutar uvad shivaroisam. You should take them out. If you take them out, is the glad kosher. Or tzrich redactic hated from Yeshua on kapon shishin keneged hamuvakois v'mitzumachos. Ulatchila yesh lahada levare livrer gam menachitim she'achlu mehem achbarim or sheyeh shishim kenegdem. If the mice get to it, so bachitim shebol b'sfina. So they became a sphere. Sfina travels on the ocean, so there's water, jumping up onto the boat. So it could make. They didn't have where to store it, so they had like a grub, and they put into the grub, but there could be dampness in the grub. Im hen yeveshes v'koshes to see if the kernels are dry and they didn't change their appearance. Is demos is kshetis. If they were laying upstairs in an attic, v'yodu aleim geshamim derech hagag, there was a leak in the roof, and rain came in on it. Is b'tzas mekaimus. There's places that could be laying spread out in the whole attic, but there's only a few holes in the roof where water can come in. Asuras abulum nafal aleim k'tzas sheleg k'tzas mayim b'mokam echad. So masaluk oisam sheyesh l'stapik b'hem. You take away those that you are not sure about them. V'asham mutaris, and the rest of them will be mutar. This was all today. They have better system of storing the wheat and storing the kernels and everything, but there still could be different shaylas that we have to be careful that no water should come in contact with it. We'll learn more later.